A minor injury is a minor injury. It's nothing to be worried over, but it can be a reminder of a unit that will play a big role in whether or not the Jets meet their expectations this year. Let's discuss today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, August 6th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs have wound down, the sports have stopped sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the Jets had some minor injury news yesterday. Tyron Smith missed his second consecutive practice with what the team's terming as tightness. He also missed Saturday's scrimmage, which the Jets termed a scheduled day off. So Smith dealing with a very minor injury. And I don't want to go overboard worrying about Tyron Smith, but I do think this injury to Tyron Smith, the minor injury, reminds us of how important a certain unit is going to be for the New York Jets this season. And it also reminds us that this is a unit that could go in a lot of different directions. And that's the offensive line, of course. And if you follow the Jets the last couple of years, the offensive line has not been very good. This year, the offensive line has a lot of potential to be good. And I mean that. I think there are situations like the Jets corner group. You're talking about what the Jets have at corner with Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter II. We know they're going to be good. It's almost, I guess like there's a scenario where the Jets suffer injuries or something like that, or some guys have unexpected declines, but it's almost a lock that the Jets corners are going to be good. You also have your situations like a guy like Will McDonald. You hope he's going to be good. You don't know. You hope he's going to be good. And then you have situations like last year with the Jets offensive line, the group we had a year ago, where you're trying to talk yourself into a scenario where this could work out. You're trying to convince yourself this could work out, where you're going with a 38-year-old left tackle and Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton, who hasn't played in 2 years. And you know it's probably not going to work, but you're just hoping. The Jets offensive line is a unit that can be good. I don't think you're just hoping with them. I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, but there's not a guarantee. And this line is really important. The offensive line is always important, but for this year's Jets team, if this offensive line clicks the way it has the potential to, this team could go a long way because we know they've got a great defense. We know that we've got a Hall of Fame quarterback. We know that the skill position group is at least upgraded. And this offensive line, I mean, on paper, going from left to right with Smith, John Simpson, Joe Tippmann, Elijah Vera Tucker, Morgan Moses, then behind them, your top backup tackle is Olu Fashanu, who's the top 11 overall pick. It's not crazy to say this could be a really good offensive line, but there are some questions, and there are certain things that will determine whether or not this line meets its potential. Again, this is different from last year. Last year, we were just like trying to convince ourselves that some situation that looked really bad on paper was going to pan out. This year's line could pan out really well, but there are some questions. And the first question, kind of touches on what we're discussing with Smith. And I'm not worried about Tyron Smith having tightness this time of year. In fact, this is one of those things that happens this time of year. Guys are getting back to what I call football shape. There's a difference between being in great physical condition where, you can run for a long time, or you can, do a lot of workouts. And then there's like actually doing football activities, the techniques you got to use, the way, the movements that the football players need to have. It's not uncommon for guys to suffer injuries like that. It is, however, a concern, especially with Tyron Smith, because Tyron Smith's been a guy who has missed a lot of time in recent years. I mean, last year was the first time in 4 years he did not miss 6 games, missed at least 3 games every year since 2016. So it's not even that, you can expect Tyron Smith to play 17 games. I don't think that's realistic. The question is, can he get to 13 like he did a year ago? Gets you to 13, and maybe you have Olu Fashanu filling in for the last 4. That's something you can live with. Smith, of course, now 33. And, the two things studies have shown us that the two things that are predictive of future injuries in the NFL are age and an injury history. Players who get injured once are more likely to get injured again than players who, are more durable. And players who get old, as players age, their body has a tougher time recovering. Smith was never healthy in his young days. Now he's one of the older tackles in the NFL. So I think there's reason for concern, but there's also reason for excitement. I mean, look, this guy was the second team All-Pro last year. The guy's really good. Guy potentially a Hall of Fame tackle. And I'm sure there are some people who are asking me why I'm even saying potentially, because Tyron Smith has been that good through his career. And if he is healthy, if he plays, I mean, it's not just that he's going to be good, is he's going to make everybody around him better. John Simpson's going to look better next to him. He is just a dominant tackle when he's on the field. But when he's on the field is the operative term. And the Jets have a couple of, Smith's not the only guy who's got that question with him. I think we all know Elijah Vera Tucker. I would argue that the seminal moment for the Jets offensive line in both 2022 and 2023 came in a road game in the early part of the season against Denver, because in both of those games, Elijah Vera Tucker suffered a season-ending injury, triceps injury in 2022 and Achilles injury in 2023. And the line was never the same after that point. And leading into those games, leading up to that point, the Jets had to shuffle both years. The Jets had to shuffle their offensive line a lot because of injuries, because of ineffective play. And Vera Tucker was kind of like the one guy who held things together, because he was moving all over the line. He was moving from guard to tackle. He was holding up. I don't think AVT is a natural tackle. I think he's a guy you can play in an emergency situation, but you can play him in an emergency situation to tackle, and he held up fine. I mean, there's a difference between a guy who holds up and a guy who doesn't hold up. Either guy might be giving you a spectacular play, but at least one of these guys is, not destroying you. AVT, for a guy who had to move to tackle on the fly, did pretty well and was playing well at guard both seasons. There's a question, can he stay healthy? And I've been very vocal about this. I think he's going to stay healthy. I think this is going to be the year for AVT. I don't have the concerns I had with Becton a year ago, because Becton's injuries seemed like they were going to be more chronic things that were going to linger, that were going to have lasting impacts. The knee over and over. Was he going to lose explosiveness? I think there was a lot to be worried about with Becton. AVT's injuries, for a guy his age and a guy his position, they should not be the types of things that linger. He should be healthy. And then, even Morgan Moses. Look, Morgan Moses is the model of durability. He did suffer an injury last season. Now, if you've been reading about this, it's very impressive they kept playing, because he only missed 3 games, and then he was kind of platooning at right tackle for part of that season. It had a 60% tear in one of his pecs. Unbelievably painful. It shows you the durability. It shows you the toughness of Morgan Moses. They only missed 3 games. But the fact that injury happened, again, guys are more likely to get injured as they age. And I'm not overly worried about Morgan Moses' ability to stay healthy. But, when you're talking a guy who's 33, 34, as you age, sometimes, injuries happen more frequently. Dwayne Brown was a pretty big model of health for most of his career, but at the end of his career, when he was with the Jets, age caught up to him. Now, Dwayne Brown was 37, 38. Jets tackles are 33, 34. So a little different. I don't have the level of concern I did with Dwayne Brown, but I think it's worth noting. And even last year, Joe Tippmann missed some time. So, Jets have some question marks, but how much of this is guys the Jets have are more injury prone than other guys? Because injuries happen on the offensive line. I mean, that's just the nature. It's so physical that you can't help but get injured on the offensive line. The Jets do have some guys who are a little bit more susceptible to injury risk than others. And I think we all know a lot of the NFL, a lot of your success is, can you stay healthy? Jets had stayed healthy last year. Maybe the season would have gone different, but it did not. And the Jets, they have these guys who are injury risks, but they also have these guys are also really, really good players. And they're going to help when they're on the field, they're going to help the Jets control the point of attack. If they stay on the field a long time, again, this Jets team can go a really long way. Now, head on the Lockdown Jets podcast, we'll talk about another thing that will shape the trajectory of the Jets offensive line this season. That's the question. It's another question about Father Time. It's not so much injuries. It's about the quality of play. And we'll discuss that in more detail, continuing here on this Tuesday edition of Lockdown Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. You love sports. We would love them so much that we never want them to stop, but basketball and hockey ended earlier in the summer. Now we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel helps us keep the sports going whenever we want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. Yankees and Mets both trying to make pushes here as we enter August in Major League Baseball, both teams trying to make a push to the postseason. You may be a fan of another team. And of course, football is right around the corner. Sports will start sportsing like we want them to soon. Once the Jets hit the field, you hit Jets over-unders. You can bet on the Jets week 1 in San Francisco where they are underdogs. It's all on FanDuel. And again, this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. We're talking Jets offensive line. And if you've followed the Jets the last couple of years, if you've followed the Jets since, I guess, DeBrickashaw, Ferguson, and Nick Mangold retired, you've probably been frustrated by the way the offensive line has performed. It's not an accident the Jets have had such a shaky group of offensive linemen and so many losing records over the last several years. Now, look, quarterback's the most important position on the field, but offensive line's also really important. And when you can't control the point of attack, you're going to struggle to put points on the board. And that's been the case with the Jets. And we've talked about in the first segment about injuries, the role they will play in the Jets' offensive line and their level of success this year. And the last couple of years, the Jets have been decimated by injuries on the offensive line. Last year, the Jets had, according to Pro Football Focus, the Jets had 13 offensive linemen play at least 80 snaps. Now, think about that. You don't carry 13 offensive linemen on your team. So the Jets had multiple guys who were practice squad level players playing a lot of snaps for them last year. Injuries are important. So if the Jets can stay healthy, this offensive line is going to be really good. And if this offensive line is really good with the pieces we know the Jets have that are going to be good, this could be a very, very special season. Another question you got, and this is just me throwing it out there. This is not me saying I'm expecting this to be a major, major concern. The older Jets players on the offensive line need to maintain their high level of play. And when I do this podcast, sometimes I'm giving you my opinion. Sometimes I'm just saying, these are the angles we need to watch for. My opinion is that especially the two tackles, because these are the two older guys, my opinion is that Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses are both going to play at a very high level. I don't have a lot of concern about them declining because they played so well last year. But I think it's fair to say that whenever you have guys who are 33 years old, especially at a position like tackle, where athleticism does matter, because you're up one-on-one on an island against explosive athletes at the edge rusher spots. And you don't have help on the outside. So you got to be able to get out there fast when they line up really wide and they try and get to the quarterback. There's always a degree of concern. Now, again, it's a little different than last year. Last year, you had to wonder. Dwayne Brown, and I'm sorry to rant about Dwayne Brown as much as I do, but because Dwayne Brown had a great career in this league with the Seattle Seahawks and with the Houston Texans, and by all accounts was a good guy for the Jets to have in the locker room. But I'm still confounded by the Jets going with Dwayne Brown last year. And part of the reason was that there was a clear downward trajectory in Dwayne Brown's play prior to him coming to the Jets. In fact, very easy to forget this, but in 2022, when the Jets originally signed Dwayne Brown, they were actually looking at him as a backup tackle. They were looking at him as the number 3 tackle behind Mekhi Becton and George Fant. And then Becton suffered his injury in training camp, and suddenly the Jets became desperate, and they had to sign Dwayne Brown to step into a starting role. He was originally, though, because his level of play had dropped to such an extent, he was originally being looked at as a depth player, though, and he was a guy who was available when training camp started. It's different from Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses. Smith, again, he was a second-team All-Pro last year. Now, I think Dallas probably let him go because they were concerned with the age and injuries. I think it's more the injuries than decline. And because Smith played at such a high level last year, when he's on the field, and injuries are a bigger concern for Smith than decline. When he's on the field, he's still playing at a high level. Even if Smith declines, 10%, he's still going to be an above average left tackle. And left tackle is a spot where it's great to have a guy who dominates, but it's more important to just have a guy who can play there, a guy who can hold up, because left tackle is a spot. If you don't have an NFL caliber player, it will destroy you. And we've seen some of the guys who just have had to throw out left tackle because of injuries the last couple of years. If you don't have a competent left tackle, it will destroy you. Now, great left tackle takes you to another level. So, you'd like to see Smith maintain a really high level of play because, again, he could be a difference maker. But even if it declines a little bit, you're still in good shape. So I'm not expecting a big decline out of Smith. And I think Moses is the same thing. A good offensive line is not built on 5 stars. You got to have some lunch pail types. You got to have some guys who just go out and do their job professionally. Moses, good run blocker, holds up okay in pass protection. guy who's done his job very effectively for a long time in this league. In fact, another thing I always talk about on this show is how the Jets let him go after 2021. Man, what a mistake that was in retrospect, especially because of Moses' ability to do everything credibly and to be on the field. So look, I'm saying this because I would say this about any guy who's in their early to mid 30s. I'm not saying that I'm expecting it because we've been given very little reason to expect that either of these guys will decline. And the fact that their play remains steady into their 30s is a positive thing. And part of it means that the base level of play is really high. And that even if you have a little decline, you're still going to get a very effective player at either of these spots. But again, it's worth noting. And another guy I'd throw in the mix, a different type of player, different type of trying to maintain this level of play is John Simpson, who was a really interesting trajectory. A year ago, he was a reserve future signing by the Baltimore Ravens, which means he was not on a roster at the end of 2022. He was not part of an NFL team's roster at the end of 2022. So when you're on an NFL roster, teams are able to sign you for the next season in January. And that's what Simpson had to do. And these are usually guys who are just there to round out the training camp roster. He ended up winning the starting job at left guard for the Baltimore Ravens, started every game for them. And he wasn't great. Look, he was second in the league in penalties. But that's still, when I like to look at trajectory. And when you start off as a guy who nobody really wanted, and within the span of a year, you're starting for the team that gets the 1 seed in your conference, that says something good about your trajectory. And Simpson may not be spectacular, but I think last year, by all accounts, the Ravens line was rated quite highly. And the Ravens line, they had a lot of injuries themselves. They had the shuffle guys in and out. So Simpson had to get used to playing next to a lot of different guys next to him. And look, he played at a level where, and again, not everybody's going to be a star. If John Simpson is your fifth best lineman, I think your line's going to be in pretty good shape because Baltimore's line was in pretty good shape last year with Simpson. If Simpson's your best lineman or second best lineman, you're in big trouble. But that's not going to be the case with the Jets. But you need to maintain that level of play because, again, a year ago, he was a guy who was kind of on the fringes of the league. Now he's a starter with a nice contract from the New York Jets after a relatively successful season with Baltimore. So the question is, can he maintain that level of play and still play at a level where, he can be like the number 5 starter on offensive line? That's critical. It's not really age related. It's just more of a question of, can he do it? Because last year was the first year he really played at that level. So something worth watching. But it's not just about maintaining level of play. Just need to see some improvement from some players. As we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets, we'll talk about the guys who the Jets are going to be looking to elevate their game this season on the offensive line, and they could make all the difference in the world. That's ahead here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. And even when we all know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Therapy has so many benefits. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. The Locked On Jets podcast on this Tuesday. We're talking about the New York Jets offensive line with a lot of potential this season, an offensive line that, if it lives up to its potential, could take this team a long way. Now let's talk about some of the players who can elevate their offensive line even further. And these are players who can elevate their own games. And I think I would have to begin by talking about second-year center Joe Tippmann. And part of me feels like expectations on Tippmann are kind of unfair just because of the position he plays and the team he plays for, because I've heard names like Kevin Mawai and Nick Mangold thrown out discussing Tippmann. And look, I'd love it if Tippmann was that good, but he doesn't need to be a Hall of Famer like Mawai. He doesn't need to be, the best center in the NFL for a number of years or a top 5 center like Mangold to end up being a really good player for this team. I think last year Tippmann was thrown into a tough spot. He was thrown into the middle of a broken offensive line. He was thrown into a situation where he did not have quality players around him. In fact, when he first entered the lineup last year, he was thrown in a guard, which is not his natural position. I thought he held up pretty well. Then he moved to center after Connor McGovern got injured. Actually, Tippmann got injured himself. So Tippmann returned to the lineup after injury, moved to center. And there were some good games. There were some bad games. But I think if you put it into context that he was in the middle of a broken offensive line, like I don't think it's unfair to say the Jets offensive line was broken last season. To have good games and bad games, that for a rookie, that actually is a pretty good outcome, I think. And the question is, can he stabilize? Because I think Tippmann has all the tools necessary to be a quality starting center in this league. He's big, but he also moves really well. I mean, you can see why the Jets drafted him. This is, as we know, Joe Douglas is really, really focused on the measurables. Tippmann's big and he moves well. So, his size allows him when he can lock on to somebody, no pun intended, because the name of the podcast is Locked On Jets. But when Tippmann can lock on to somebody, he moves them. He also, he's a guy you can pull. You can't pull every center. You can't have, and it just opens up more plays in the run game, because if you can put your center on the move and have him, go to his left or right and block a linebacker down the field, then other defenders need to figure out, they might be hit at a bunch of different angles, because now instead of the center blocking me, maybe a guard's coming down or maybe a tackle's coming down. It just adds more hesitancy to a defense playing the run. So a lot Tippmann can bring to the table. We know, like, one of the stories of training camp this year is that he struggled so far with the snaps. And as I've said, I mean, we're getting to a point where we're near the point where I'd like to see this fixed. I'm not at the point where I have a ton of concern over it. I'd have more concern if Tippmann had never played center before. And the Jets were Tippmann's played center a long time. He knows how to snap the ball. And he and Rodgers will figure it out. Part of what training camp's for is working out the issues. He quarterback center exchange. It's something that takes time to develop. Rodgers, I'm sure, has certain ways he likes receiving the football. They have a month to figure it out. And then after that point, how good can Tippmann be? If he can be really good, then he can take the Jets to the next level. AVT, we talked about Elijah Vera Tucker in our last segment. And, I've heard a lot of people say he played at a Pro Bowl level. I think it's different, though. And look, I probably said this myself, but I do think it's different playing at a Pro Bowl level for like a month and a half and sustaining it through the course of the whole season. Because lots of guys have like 6 good games in them over the course of a long season. The question is, can you put together 17 good games? So I think, like, for AVT, this kind of meshes with our discussion of, can he stay on the field? It's significant, though. It's one thing to play well for a month and a half. It's another thing to sustain that over the course of the long season, because AVT can play up to his potential at the guard position. I mean, that's another thing that can really change this offensive line. And then the last guy I'm going to talk about is Olu Fashanu. We talked a bit about him yesterday. And I think Olu's going to play this year. I don't think that, look, the Jets would love it if he could just sit on the bench the full season and learn, and have Tyron Smith take him under his wing and learn the finer points of playing the tackle position, maybe add a little bulk in the weight room. Jets would love that. But as we discussed earlier, I don't think it's realistic to expect Tyron Smith to play 17 games, and even Morgan Moses, who I would put, look, I would guess Morgan Moses could play 17 games, but it's less of a lock than it was maybe 2 years ago. And it's really just because of age, because of, players get injured more frequently as they age. I mentioned this yesterday. For even a tackle drafted 11th overall, the hope is that you can hold your own. The hope's not to dominate. It usually doesn't happen, even a highly drafted tackle that steps in right away as a Pro Bowler. It occasionally happens, and it's wonderful when it does. And I'd be happy if it happened for Olu. I would sign up for that right now, of course. But in reality, it's a difficult adjustment to the NFL, because you're going up against some of the most talented pass rushers you'll ever face, much more talented than the guys you go up on a week-to-week basis in college. Even the guys Olu went up against in the Big Ten, nothing compared to what he'll go up against in the NFL. Because in the NFL, pass rushers, in college, if you could shut down the pass rusher's first move, you pretty much neutralized him. The NFL, pass rushers all have like a backup move. If you neutralize their first move, they have a plan B they can go to. And a lot of them even have a plan C. So that's why a lot of rookie tackles struggle in this league. And there's also just faster opponents, stronger opponents, savvier opponents, all that. When Olu's called upon, can he hold his own? I'm not going to put expectations on him higher than that. Now, in the future, certainly year 2, year 3, year 4, we want him to do better than hold his own. But if he holds his own, if he just is out there and he's not a weakness, again, when you see a tackle who just sinks, a tackle can sink an offense if he's really bad. A tackle who can hold his own, he may not be great, he may not be moving the needle, but he at least allows the offense to function. That's what we want Olu to be. Can he get to that point? I think he might already be at that point. And if he can, and hopefully Tyron's 50. If Tyron Smith gives you 13 games and Olu, just need Olu to hang in there for 4, I think you're going to like what you see out of this Jets offense this year, because I think the offensive line is set up to be very, very solid. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody, and send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we will do our weekly mailbag.